If you're the person everyone comes to for clear thinking, but right now you can't think your way out of your own stuckness, this video is for you. You may think that you're stuck because you haven't figured it out yet, but very often, especially for smart, capable people, the problem is quite the opposite. You're thinking too much in the wrong mode. 3 weeks ago, I was close to walking away from this business. Not because I had no options, but because I could argue for every option. I could make a case for continuing, for stopping, for pushing through, and for walking away. And the more I tried to think my way into clarity, the more stuck I became. That is the loop I would like to unpack today. I'm Gwen Bach. I have a master's degree in applied neuroscience, and I am the founder of Applied Brain Lab, where I study how modern environments shape decision-making in ambitious professionals and business owners. In this video, I'll show you why smart people get stuck harder, why more thinking often makes it worse, and the processing shift that helps you start moving again. In the last video, I walked through what I call the cognitive load cascade. Overwhelm leads to overload. Overload squeezes working memory. Reduced working memory impairs flexibility, and blocked progress creates frustration. And that frustration becomes the experience of being stuck. Today, I want to zoom into one specific part of that cascade, because there is something that happens in high-functioning people that makes them especially vulnerable to this pattern. Their thinking is not weak. Their thinking is too capable of building the trap, and that's a very different problem. Most people assume intelligence is a straightforward advantage when you're trying to get unstuck, because it's more analytical, better pattern recognition, the ability to hold complexity, and of course, in most situations that is true. Your ability to think deeply is probably one of the reasons you have achieved what you have achieved. It helps you anticipate consequences other people miss, hold competing priorities at once, and understand problems at a level most people do not reach. But there is one condition where all of that breaks down: rumination. And rumination is not the same as thinking. This distinction matters more than it might seem. Thinking moves, it generates new information, updates as it goes. You begin with one question and end up somewhere different from where you started. A new distinction, clearer, a next step, different understanding of the problem, but rumination circles. It comes back to the same material again and again, and it does not update, and it does not resolve. You may spend an hour with the problem and end up with the exact same uncertainty, just with more emotional weight around it. And from the inside, rumination can feel responsible. It can feel like you're being thorough, like you're being honest with yourself, or like you're taking the problem seriously. And it can feel like maturity or self-awareness. But the question is not, am I thinking about this? The real question is the thinking creating movement? Because those two are not the same thing. Research by Nolan Hoeksema et al. In 2008 found that rumination is associated with impaired problem solving, not just negative mood. So this is not just about feeling bad while you think. It is about the thinking style itself, making it harder to generate a way through. And this is where smart people get caught. If you are analytical, reflective, self-aware, and used to solving difficult problems with your mind, your first move when something feels wrong is usually to think more. And normally that works. If a project is unclear, you think it through. If a business problem is complex, you analyze the moving pieces. If a decision has consequences, you weigh them. That's not the problem. The problem starts when that thinking becomes repetitive, self-focused, and unresolved. Because at that point, the same capacity that usually helps you start consuming the resources you need to move. The brain is active, but it's not progressing. It's like a car with the engine running and the wheels spinning in mud. Lots of movement, but no traction. And when you are ambitious, this can be especially hard to spot because you're probably not just sitting there doing nothing. You're thinking, researching, journaling, talking it through. From the outside, it may even look productive, but internally, the system is not moving forward. It is looping. There's a second layer here that matters, especially for ambitious professionals and business owners. High standards. I'm not talking about caring about your work. That is not the problem. I'm talking about the kind of standard that turns into a constant internal gap, where there is always some version of, I should be further along. I should have solved this by now. I should be clearer. I should know what to do. I should be able to handle this. And once that gap opens, the brain starts scanning. What am I missing? Why am I like this? What is wrong with my process? Why can I do hard things for other people, but why not this? And why can I be so clear in one area of my life and so unclear here? And that scanning feels like problem solving. But very often, it is self-critical rumination. Research by Fern et al. In 2022 found that self-critical rumination helps explain the link between perfectionism and lower self-esteem. In plain terms, high standards become psychologically expensive when they keep turning into repetitive self-criticism. And that matters for stuckness because self-criticism does not simply hurt your feelings, it adds load. Your brain has to monitor the stuckness as a threat, manage the internal noise it generates, and assign meaning to what it says about you. And when working memory is already crowded, that is exactly the wrong direction, because the brain does not just have to deal with the original problem anymore. Now it also has to deal with you having a problem with the fact that you have the problem. And that second layer is often where people get really stuck, including me. Not just, I do not know what to do, but what does it mean about me that I do not know what I do? And it's not just, this business decision is hard, but why am I not more decisive? Or not just, I'm tired, but why can't I handle this better? And now that stuck state has become more complex because the brain is not only solving the external problem, it is also defending against an internal threat. Research by Beckwith et al. In 2014 found that worry and rumination are associated with reduced cognitive control. So the loop is not just annoying, it reduces the very control functions you need in order to interrupt it. The more stuck you feel, the more you monitor yourself. And the more you monitor yourself, the more you feed the loop. And the more you feed the loop, the less cognitive flexibility you have. And the less flexibility you have, the harder it becomes to see the next step. So the problem is not that smart people do not think enough. Very often the problem is that we're thinking in the wrong mode. And there is a specific type of thinking I want to name here, because it looks sophisticated from the outside, but becomes very unhelpful when you're stuck. Abstract analytic self-focus. Research by Watkins and Moles in 2005 found that abstract analytic self-focus can impair problem solving when it becomes repetitive. And this matters because abstract thinking is not bad. It's part of what capable people are capable in the first place. It helps you see patterns, build meaning, connect ideas across context, ask deeper questions. But when you are stuck in abstract thinking, you can start asking at the wrong level. Question like, why am I like this? Why does this always happen? Or what does this mean about me and my future? What is the deeper pattern in here? What does this say about who I am? And those questions can sound smart. They can sound like exactly the kind of question a self-aware adult should be asking. But they're often too big to move. They pull the mind into general meaning when the same system, what it needs is actually a concrete next step. Research by Watkin and Tealsdale in 2001 showed that abstract self-focused thinking is associated with more overgeneralizing autobiographical memory. Practically, that means your brain starts retrieving broad patterns instead of specific details. You stop thinking what actually happened on Tuesday afternoon, 2 o'clock, and you start thinking, why do I always do this? And that are two very different things. One can be worked with, the other becomes an identity story. And smart people can build extremely convincing identity stories. And I'm not focused enough, I'm not disciplined enough, maybe I'm just not cut out for this, maybe I keep sabotaging myself. And I'm really good in playing this game. So I'm not saying those questions are never worth exploring. Sometimes they are, and there is a place for deeper reflection, for therapy, for asking what something means. But if you're overloaded and stuck right now, those questions are not the entry point. They are too abstract. They make the problem bigger, and they do not give you a next move. So here's the shift. You may not be stuck because you have failed to understand the problem. You may be stuck because you are trying to solve a movement problem with abstract analysis. And the brain cannot move from abstraction alone. It needs a handle, a next test, a piece of information, an action small enough to reduce uncertainty. And that is why the practical tool today is not about thinking harder, it's about changing the level of the question. When you notice that you are thinking about the same thing for the third time today and nothing has changed, treat that as a signal. Not that you need more analysis, but that you have moved from problem solving into looping. And that is the point. I would like you to get a piece of paper, not your phone, paper, because the point is not just to record the thought, it is to take it out of the mental loop and put it somewhere the brain can see it differently. And for myself, I like to call this the 10% uncertainty shift. The goal is not to solve your whole life on a page. That is exactly the kind of pressure that keeps our brains stuck. The goal is much, much smaller. You are going to reduce uncertainty by 10%. That is it. Start by writing down the thing you're circling. Just in your own words plainly. Nobody's going to read it. So don't make it elegant or explain the entire backstory. Just one thing I'm circling is. And then ask, what is the single most specific thing I'm actually uncertain about right now? Not what should I do with my life, but do I know what the very next step is? Also not why am I so stuck? I ask that a lot. But which decision have I not actually made? Or not, is this business right for me? But which part of the business is creating the most friction for me this week? Not, am I on the wrong path? But what information would help me evaluate the next 2 weeks more clearly? You're moving from abstract to concrete, and that change matters physiologically, not just as a reframe. Research by Watkins and Teasdale in 2004 showed that shifting from abstract processing to more concrete experiential processing can reduce rumination. So this is not just a journaling exercise, it is a processing shift. You are changing the mode the brain is operating in, moving from what does this say about me to what exactly needs to be known or done next? And the brain responds very differently to those two questions. Once you have the specific uncertainty written down, write the next line. What is the one piece of information or one action that would reduce this uncertainty by just 10%? Not solve it, reduce it, because when you are stuck, trying to solve the whole thing often keeps you stuck. It creates too much pressure, too much emotional meaning, and too many consequences at once. But reducing uncertainty by just 10% creates movement, and movement changes the state. So 3 lines, they're simple. One thing I'm circling is the specific uncertainty is, and the piece of information that would reduce the uncertainty by 10% is. And then do that one thing. Send the message to your brain, look up the number, write the first paragraph, ask the person, check the actual cost, put the decision into one sentence, name the constraint, choose the first test, cancel the thing you already know is draining you. Sometimes something that is concrete enough so the brain stops treating the whole problem as one unresolved cloud, because that is what smart people often do. We keep the problem at a level of the cloud, and then we wonder why we cannot move it. But clouds do not move through analysis. They move when you condense them into something specific: a decision, a question, a small next action, a test, a conversation. That is what creates traction for us. And I would like to be clear about what this is not saying. The goal here is not to become less thoughtful. I'm not telling you to stop analyzing or to ignore complexity or force clarity before it is there. The goal here is to know when thinking is serving you, and when it's serving movement, and when thinking has become the substitute for movement, because there's a line, and once you can see that line, you get some control back. You can say, this is no longer productive thinking, this is a loop. And if it's a loop, the solution is not in this loop. The solution is a different thinking mode. So here is the mental model I would like to leave you with. Being smart does not protect you from getting stuck. Sometimes it gives you better tools for staying stuck. More sophisticated analysis, more convincing arguments for waiting until you understand the whole picture properly, more ways to turn a practical problem into an identity story. But stuckness does not always need more understanding. Sometimes it needs a change in processing mode, from abstract to concrete, from self-analysis to uncertainty reduction, and from what does this say about me to what is the one next specific thing I need to know or do. That is the 10% uncertainty shift. And when your mind keeps circling the same question and nothing changes, do not assume you need a better answer. Sometimes you just need a better level of questions, because why am I like this gets you stuck for a month. But what is the next one specific thing I can reduce by 10%? That can create movement for you today. And once there's movement, the brain gets new information. And once the brain gets this new information, the stuck state starts to change. In the next video, I'm going to show you the hidden decision underneath most stuck state, because very often the problem is not that you do not know enough, it is that there is one decision you have not fully admitted you're making. And once you find that decision, the whole stuck state starts to look very different.